Morning, everyone.
Morning.
My legislation, early voting in Pennsylvania, amends sections and adds new sections in the Pennsylvania Election Code. But before I begin, I would like to take a moment to thank some key individuals and those who have made this fellowship an unforgettable experience. First and foremost, I'd like to thank my family for being here today. I would like to thank Representative Mike Hanna and Team Hanna, Angela, Alicia, Gail, Donna, Andy, and Adam. I would like to thank Audrey, Ali Jr., and Brogan. I would also like to thank the Bipartisan Management Committee, Mr. Chief Clerk Tony Barkish, and the Program Coordinator Ray Whitaker for coordinating a successful fellowship program every semester. Growing up, my dad stressed the importance of voting and how blessed we are as citizens that have this right. Until a couple of years ago, I wasn't old enough to vote. However, my dad always brought me with him on election day to wait hours in line, converse with other voters, give his name to the volunteer, and watch him cast his vote. When I started to brainstorm legislative ideas, I realized that over recent election years, America has seen incitement for elections in addition to increased participation from a variety of groups such as young voters, senior citizens, and evangelical Christians. The result of excitement and voter participation stems from how states implement methods to actively entice voters to participate in the process. So when Andy suggested early voting in Pennsylvania as a project, this is not a new concept, but it's a natural and exciting time to explore early voting. A brief history of where voting began to where we are today. In 1787, the Constitution granted males the right to vote. In 1845, an election day was established for the 27 states. So between 1787 and 1845, each of the 27 states voted on different days. In 1870, the 15th Amendment granted all males the right to vote. In 1920, the 19th Amendment granted the women the right to vote. In 1971, the voting age was lowered from 21 to 18. Currently, we have 32 states plus the District of Columbia utilizing one or a combination of early voting methods. Throughout history, we have gradually improved voting methods, and we should continue to improve those methods as society progresses. A big issue during elections is that more than 30% of the population was not participating in the process. States believe they can solve this problem over time by implementing early voting. There are 3 different methods of early voting. There are an all-mail system, a no-excuse absentee ballot, and early in-person voting. The states either use one method or a combination of the two and not including the all-mail system. For an all-mail system, the entire election is conducted through mail. As early as 45 days, states such as Oregon and Washington mail the ballot to the registered voter's home, and they have until the state's deadline to return the ballot. Another method of early voting is no-excuse absentee ballot. And according to the National Conference of State Legislators, 27 states, plus the District of Columbia, out of the 32 states that offer early voting, allows their voters to vote by absentee ballot. Under this method, an excuse as to why an elector would not be in the district is not required in order to vote. The last method is early in-person voting, and currently 32 states, plus the District of Columbia, utilizes this method. Early in-person voting provides a time period where voters can physically go to a polling place and cast their ballot in the same manner as Election Day. These methods have shown over time that more voters are taking advantage of early voting. For example, according to the New York Times, in 1996, 7% of voters voted early. In 2000, an increase of 16%. In 2004, 23%. In 2008, 31%. And in the recent election, 35% voted early. 3.5 million voters took advantage of early voting in 2012 and in 2008. So now let's talk about our current election methods in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania does not provide a method for early voting currently. As it is outlined in the election code, Pennsylvania provides for voting on election day, excused absentee ballot, emergency ballot, and alternative ballots for individuals who cannot physically make it to the polls. On election day, Pennsylvania requires the polling places to be open from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. An elector that will be absent from his district is eligible to vote by absentee. Now we'll discuss my legislation. First, my legislation will amend the definition of elections to include early voting. Next, the legislation implements early in-person voting. The reason that I chose early in-person voting and not to include no excuse absentee ballot voting is because when I researched voter fraud, I found that voter fraud is more likely to occur in the absentee ballot process. According to the New York Times and Huffington Post, about 10 documented cases are recorded for in-person voter fraud since 2000. On the contrary, there are dozens of documented cases of voter fraud by absentee ballot. In a 2005 report signed by President Jimmy Carter and James Baker, who served as Secretary of State under George H.W. Bush, the Commission on Federal Election Reform concluded, and I quote, "Absentee ballots remain the largest source of potential voter fraud." In the 2008 presidential election, 35.5 million voters requested absentee ballots, but only 27.9 million absentee votes were counted, according to political scientist Charles Stewart. This could be a result from a number of factors. However, it seems there was a discrepancy in the process from voters never receiving the requested absentee ballots to the completed ballots by the voters arriving at the County Board of Elections office. And it's important that integrity remains in the election process. Section 1201 in the current Pennsylvania Election Code requires the counties to give notice of November elections to the county newspapers no more than 10 days and no earlier than 3 days. My legislation would extend it to no more than 15 days and no earlier than 9 days to cover the early voting period that I'm proposing. The 32 states that currently have early voting, their time period ranges anywhere from 4 to 45 days. Just to give you some examples, Ohio's early voting begins 35 days before election day, Illinois is 17 days, Iowa is 40 days, and Florida is 7 days before election. As a result of my research, I decided to model Florida's time period as 7 days. I also like the idea of having consecutive days to early vote rather than having for an extended period of time with non-consecutive days. In addition, I personally believe that citizens should follow all election events before casting a ballot for a candidate. Those events may include candidate debates that typically occur around late October. Therefore, any period earlier than 1 week will conflict with these events. Section 1201.3 of my legislation establishes the early voting period beginning 8 days prior to election day and ending 7 days after it begins. So let's take the recent election, for example. Because election day is always the first Tuesday in November, or November 6th, my proposed early voting period will begin on Monday, or October 29th, and end on Sunday, or November 4th, before Election Day. This time frame will give Pennsylvanians 7 days to vote early. This provides convenience for Pennsylvanians by allowing voters to participate according to their schedule and alleviates long lines on Election Day. When researching how other states handle early voting sites, most states, including our neighboring state, Ohio, have a central location and designated satellite locations during the early voting period. My legislation follows that same format by giving the counties the flexibility to designate sites based on the criteria that best serves their electorate. Unfortunately, as the legislative drafting process goes, some questions of clarity were recently raised, so allow me to clarify. Section 1201.4, subsection B, lines 2 and 3, should state that the county board is prohibited from designated early voting sites outside the geographical boundaries of election districts. Section 1201.4, subsection C of my legislation, states that the county board, when in the same manner as election day, appoint clerks of elections. These members would include the judge of elections, the majority and minority inspector, paid and unpaid volunteers as it is currently outlined in the Pennsylvania Election Code. Section 1203.1, subsection B of my legislation states that if such photo identification is required as established in Section 1210 of the Election Code, an elector would complete a voter certificate and be required to show acceptable photo identification. While doing research for the hours of early voting sites, I knew I wanted uniform hours during the early voting period, as opposed to multiple time frames for different days. In my research, I found that most voters voted between the hours of 8 a.m. to 10 a.m., 12 p.m. to 2 p.m., and 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. on weekdays, and from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturday and Sunday. So the section of my bill follows that same format and establishes the hours from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. Monday through Friday, and 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. on Saturday and Sunday. Section 1205.3 of my bill addresses absentee ballots. Under the current Pennsylvania Election Code, an elector may vote absentee if he is an elector may vote absentee if he is absent from the district on election day. Because I am proposing early voting, this section extends that period to cover the early voting period. The main goal of early voting is to increase voter participation and its steps the Commonwealth in the right direction by providing convenience for the electorate. Section 1225, subsection D of my legislation, requires the judge of elections to submit a voter checklist to the Secretary of the Commonwealth to ensure that no one votes twice during the early voting period and or on election day. The proposed early voting period does not include the Monday before election day to ensure the county board and the Secretary of the Commonwealth's voter checklists are identical. In addition, the ballots that are cast during the early voting period will not be tabulated until the end of election day. The last subsection of my bill requires each early voting site to submit a report to the Secretary of the Commonwealth, security procedures that will be taken to secure the ballots every day. So let's talk about funding. So exploring funding was the most interesting aspect of my project. The first step was to see exactly how much election day costs the state of Pennsylvania. I contacted the Bureau of Commissions, I contacted the Department of State, and they informed me that they don't have information on election day, that I had to contact the individual counties. So I went to go contact the individual counties, and they referred me back to the Department of State. After trying this again, the Department of State informed me that they only received cost-related information concerning absentee ballots. Allegheny County was the only county that had some sort of information, financial information to provide me. The county informed me that it cost about $923,000 to run on election day. Even after the gentleman gave me this estimate, he informed me that the number is just an estimate because there are too many variables to give an accurate estimate. The next step was to search other states in their funding that currently have early voting. I contacted the state of Florida since my proposed time period mirrors theirs, and they couldn't give me an estimate until next month. I also contacted the Ohio Department of State, and they redirected me to individual counties. I contacted the largest county, Franklin County, and they informed me that they won't have any information on their website until December 7th. And if you realize today is December 7th, I checked this morning, it's not there. I spoke with the legislative director of Ohio State Representative Tracy Hurd, who introduced the bill on early voting during the 2009-2010 legislative session, or House Bill 260. The bill reduced the early in-person voting days from 35 days to 20 days to save on operating costs. The only information that he can tell me is that voters can still vote by absentee ballots 35 days prior, and that their printing costs increased by $15,000. After consulting with Team Hannah, we decided to find states that only utilizes early in-person voting, and from there find a state with the closest time period to my proposed time. West Virginia was the closest state with 13 early in-person voting days. However, they had 55 counties, and their biggest county, according to the census, was Randolph County with a little over 29,000 people, compared to Philadelphia County here with over 1.5 million people. I also contacted early voting expert Paul Grunke, who the National Conference of State Legislators consults with, and he released a report that said estimating the cost is uncertain because none of the costs associated with early in-person voting will be the same as compared to printing ballots. Now let's talk about how this affects Pennsylvania. The Commonwealth has minimal to no cost to implement early voting. Elections are funded between the counties and the local subdivisions. I consulted with many individuals and I kept getting the same answer, that there are too many variables to determine the cost of early in-person voting. Those variables would include the physical and the population size of the county. Just to give you some examples, Allegheny County has over 1.2 million people. Montgomery County, about 799,000 people. And on the other side, the smallest county, Cameron County, with a little over 5,000 people. The next smallest is Sullivan County with over 6,500 people. The spaces that the counties would use for early voting sites will vary county by county, therefore estimating operating costs for early in-person voting is uncertain. Last, because Pennsylvania has diverse counties, the counties will have to determine how many early voting sites will best serve the electorate. In closing, early voting in Pennsylvania does more than just expand the time period that an elector can cast a ballot. It will provide convenience for Pennsylvanians across the Commonwealth. It would alleviate the long lines of Election Day. It would increase voter participation and ensures integrity in the election process. It's time for Pennsylvania to join the 32 other states and the District of Columbia on this increasing trend of implementing early voting. Thank you for taking the time to listen to my presentation. At this time, I'll take any questions you may have.
Funding to operate would come from taxpayers?
Yes.
Okay. You're welcome. You're welcome.
A couple of questions. First, you talked about a voter checklist. And at least a few years ago, we had something called the statewide uniform registry of electors for sure, which I thought served that purpose. Are you proposing a new checklist? I'm hoping that this has not been eliminated during the last couple of years, that some of the people in here may know more about this than I do, but it was certainly something this Department of State was emphasizing in presentations to our students a few years ago. Do you know if there's an existing checklist against which voters can be checked? The idea was so you can't vote in 2 different counties.
Yes, you're absolutely correct. The voter checklist that I'm talking about in my legislation is specifically to the counties.
Okay. So this would be a supplement to the existing one?
Right.
Okay. So the existing one is not working well enough?
That's not it. It's just so, you know, the counties have their checklist, and if we do implement this early voting period, the counties will have the voter checklist to ensure that everyone votes in their proper election district.
Okay, good. Second question here. I know that you mentioned earlier that our current voting hours on election day are 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. However, you're compressing that a little bit on your proposal for the weekdays from 8 a.m. to 7 p.m. And although you are correct, the majority of the people vote during those 3 time frames. There's still, I think your larger intent here is to increase participation. And I would suggest maybe that you keep the existing time frames on the weekdays there. And also, given the Florida experience you looked at, take a look at the long lines that they had on the weekends in Florida too. And maybe see what can be, maybe consider expanding the hours beyond 1 to 5. Maybe it should be 9 to 5 on the weekends, because they have people who lie for hours in Florida on the weekends.
Right, you're absolutely correct, and I thought about that. For the purposes of this project, you know, I wanted to specifically to my research.
Yeah, and the costs were murky. You couldn't really come up with any.
Yeah, that was the interesting part of the project.
Yeah, that would be
That
part
was
of
fun.
it. That would be part of it. And okay, I think those are my. I might have some later questions.
Thank you for your question, Dr. Shipp.
You're welcome.
I just want to commend you on a good job on this project. And the one thing that really impressed me that you did actually in the development of this legislation is you sat back and you thought, who are the people that are probably going to be the ones asking questions of me during this presentation? And you came to try to get our ideas first, which is not only smart, but in reality, that's what happens. You know, when a member decides he wants to introduce legislation, he goes to the interest groups that not only are going to support it, but those that are going to oppose it, and try to come up with, you know, some sort of solution that everyone can live with. So I thought that was really smart of you to do that. Going towards that, though, you noted a lot of things that you were going to have corrected if LRB was available to change your legislation during last week. But the one thing you didn't note is Section 1201.4 says that early voting sites shall include the office of the county board, which is basically requiring that the office of the county board be an early voting site. I was wondering if in that interim between the time that we spoke, did you do any research to determine what those offices of the county boards are like? Because in my mind, I can see some county that has their office in a trailer. Is that going to be a site where we can really have early voting?
Right, you are correct, and I didn't clarify that in my speech, and I apologize for that. But not all county board of elections are a nice little building that you can go in and vote in. Some of them are, like as he referred to, trailers, and yeah.
Thank you.
No problem. Thank you for your comments, Brooklyn. Yes.
Did you point out the difference, is there a market difference in the number of people that participate in elections between states that have early voting and states that do not?
No, I do not have that information for you.
I'm most concerned about the cost, and I think you did as best you could to try to find out the cost. But if it's $923,000 or so for Allegheny County for one day, given the other variables involved, we can assume that that's a pretty significant amount for just one county. It must be we have 67. And if all of our, I realize that not all of the polling places that are currently open on election day would have to be open. But you do do have some language in here that the county has to provide places for the convenience of the voters. I mean, I live in a borough of 9,300 people. We have 6 polling places. And a couple are churches, a few are schools. So if we now have to have those locations open for 7 days prior to, and for 7 days, and additionally election day, you know, there's utility costs of those places when the election takes place at a school. I think it's usually an in-service day for the teachers and the students aren't there. So how, you know, the county's going to have to be creative in finding other places that they can use for people to go to. I just think that the costs and the inconvenience are going to be enormous. Did you consider that?
Yes, I did. And the convenience that it gives the electorate would justify the cost for the counties.
I'm not sure, as a taxpayer, I'm willing to pay those extra costs just so I don't have to stand in line. And frankly, I never had to stand in line at my polling place. I was one of the lucky ones, I guess. But additionally, the checklist the county has, you know, my polling place only has a checklist of the 400 or so people that vote at my particular poll. So if the county chooses other places, they're going to have to provide the entire list for the entire county to each polling place because, I mean, how will I know as an elector which polling place I'm going to go to in the county?
Right, and Section 1201 of my bill, when it has the notice for November elections, that would fall under that section that says it has to be extended from 15 days to 9 days to give that notification in the newspapers.
So I have to make sure I read the paper and know which place I need to go, which may not be as convenient for me, especially in Cameron County where there's only 5,000 people. How many polling places are they going to put in that county to make it convenient for the voters?
Right, and I give the counties that flexibility because they know what's best for their people. And so I left that language as far as geographically located, so it's equal up to the counties.
But then the counties are going to have to revise those lists. I mean, I can't imagine a county's going to provide the entire list of everybody in each, for Cameron, it might not be that difficult for 5,000 people, but in Philadelphia, it's going to be tremendous. So there's going to have to be a lot of lead time. In fact, I can look at your effective date. Where's your effective date?
6 years.
And that's not a whole lot of time for the county to prepare for this, because they're going to have to find the locations, revise their lists. These are just things that people should think about.
Thank you for your suggestions.
Did you do any research to find out how the other 32 states overcame the challenges of funding the early voting?
Well, they basically expanded the cost between the counties and the local subdivisions. That's pretty much it. The state doesn't incur any cost. It's between the counties and local subdivisions.
Okay.
In your presentation, you speak to the November election, but have you done any research for primary elections or special elections?
Yes, I have. In the Pennsylvania Election Code, the section right after the notice for November elections, it was deleted December 17 in 1990. So I was going to add it in there, but there wasn't a whole lot of research to give me a good estimate of the notification I should have for the primaries and the special elections, so I left that out.
So no early voting will be available for primaries?
The definition of elections includes the November elections, the primaries, and the special elections,
Okay.
by definition. So it would include that. But the notice, it doesn't, it was taken out of the Pennsylvania Election Code. So there's no notice for the primaries and the special elections.
And also, would anything in your bill currently, or change what we currently do on election day?
No. Everything that we do during early voting period as I'm proposing is the same as election day.
Thank you.
I have a couple of questions, comments. First, I want to follow up with Mr. Cassidy's question, if I understood his question correctly. He wanted to see if the implementation of early voting increased the participation overall. You quoted some percentages where the early voting numbers increase percentage-wise in these states year after year.
Right.
Correct?
Yes. I apologize for misunderstanding your question.
No, not you. I want to make sure that I understood, so I don't ask the question over again, but I want to touch on that because that seems to be the focus of legislation and the focus of the argument why the states are implementing early voting is to increase participation. The question that becomes, is that indeed happening? Because if you quote the percentage increase in the participation in early voting, does that automatically translate into an overall participation in voting? For example, if in the last election, I'm not sure what the numbers were, let's just assume that 100 million people voted in total for presidential election. If you find out that, let's use this as an example, Pennsylvania implemented early voting, say in 2008, we had for 4 years, and you step up and you say, well, the first year was 20% participation, the second year was 30, 50, but there was not a correlation in the overall vote, and let's just say we stayed around 100 million voters. You understand what I'm saying? So in your research, have you seen that participation grow in these other states, or is it just the growth in the participation in early voting?
It's the growth in participation, but also you have to take into account that some of the states that do have early voting, they use a combination of early voting as well. In addition to early voting, there's also a thing that a state like Minnesota implemented, which is same-day registration. So you can go there, register, and then vote on the same day. So states that have a combination of early voting methods, their turnout increased tremendously, versus states that only have one method. So yes, the research that I've done, it has increased a little bit, but overall it has increased by a lot.
So you're saying there is a measurable significance of increased participation in those states that have same-day registration, or are those individuals who otherwise would have registered early, or just choosing to register on that day?
There's a measured significance between the increased participation. I mean, there's also a lot of other factors that go with it. What's being on the ballot as far as ballot initiatives, the excitement for election, who's running, and stuff like that.
Maybe so. So what in your research, what you're saying to me, what I'm hearing is there are other variables that may draw people out to vote.
In addition to yes, in addition to the convenience of voting.
Okay. So over a period of time, if we were to measure each election over a period of time, it sounds to me like you're going to find turnout overall to be on balance, on average, and that there really is not a significant increase in participation in the electorate due to early voting.
Not a significant increase, but then again, also that varies by state.
Okay.
But there is going to be an increase in participation as we continue to go on and implement early voting.
And as anybody's going to hear, I can tell already, I have a serious problem with early voting and everything that we're doing. But before I get to that, I want to get into your drafting here.
Oh, no.
We touched on cost, and that concerns me because, I don't know, when I got out of school back in 19, and I started voting, I knew where my voting place was. I knew where to go. I knew who was on the ballot, and I went. You had the primary, you had the general election. When I was in school, I had a class called civics, and you learned about your government, you learned about elections and everything. And the problem I had is we spend billions between federal dollars and state dollars in schools to teach our students, to prepare them for life. And then we turn around and we want to spend more dollars to try and increase participation in voting. We say it's a right to vote. That's right. It's my right as a person whether I choose to go out and vote. But why do we have to take other taxpayers' dollars and spend it more yet again to try and get people out to vote? It's up to them whether they want to vote. I'll tell you what I'd rather see spend money on. I'd rather see us spend money on trying to get a disabled person to the poll rather than creating more polling places, opening more days just to increase participation. Again, it should be a personal responsibility, and we should not be taking other taxpayers' dollars and spending more money when we're spending billions in schools already. When you're in high school, you're 16, 17, 18 years old. You're about ready to vote, you're 18. And we should be teaching people then when the election is, and how you vote, and where you go vote, and here are the rules and procedures. And we should not be spending money yet again to get people out to vote. Question I have is on the absentee ballot, in your page 4, you talk about extending absentee ballot eligibility. I don't think that's necessary because you're not amending the section of the code that allows that the use of absentee ballot. So I don't think you need to restate that you can use it. However, what I would say is that maybe we want to change that to say that this shall not prohibit the use of absentee ballot under section whatever. The question I have is, why not make this easy and say, you can use an absentee ballot for whatever purpose you want. I'm not going to question you why you're using it, but come up with a system, if we're going to spend money, that when that absentee ballot is put in, you can mark off the name that they voted, instead of developing these conflicting provisions in voting, and then we make this big deal about fraud and fraud that's going on in voting, and you got Republicans against Democrats against Republicans, and we all wonder, why can't we vote? We run a lottery, return here, talk about the lottery. We run a lottery, we can set up Keno in bars, and you can vote, you can gamble, and we can run the system, we can run a statewide lottery system, but we can't run a voting system. Why is that?
I understand your questions and your opinions. However, to answer your question about the absentee, there's a lot more fraud. And the main goal that I had was to keep the integrity in the process. I think that's something that we can all agree on, to keep the integrity and not to have this increase of voter fraud.
You mentioned fraud in your presentation, you said fraud takes place, and you mentioned absentee ballot. And that leads into my next question, is why is that? Why is there fraud in the use of absentee ballots?
I don't have a definite answer for you. However, there is registration fraud and stuff of that magnitude. To the best of my knowledge.
I think that's about it, but you did a good job in your presentations. Again, I just wish we would just spend a little more money where it needs to be spent and stop trying to force the citizens to do something we want them to do when they should have the choice to do what they want to do. But thank you very much.
And to comment on your opinion about spending money on education and voting, Mr. Chief Clerk and I had a conversation about spending that money on teaching our kids in schools 16, 17 to the voting process and actual government instead of turning 18 and learning about it when you have to go do it. So.
Now, I wasn't going to speak to this, and I usually don't in this question and answer period. But it is supposed to be a question and answer period, questioning you on your legislation. I didn't think it was a situation where you stand up and make a speech, nor you question or make a philosophical statement. And I don't mean to offend you, but I think that's what you did. The conversation you and I had is a philosophical conversation as to education, as to voting rights, as to voting responsibilities. I would commend you for what you did. I think what you're after here is not so much finding what's right or wrong, finding whether somebody should vote, whether they shouldn't vote, when they should vote. You just want to make it easier for people to vote.
Correct.
Simple. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes.
I'm sorry, but I don't have a question. I just wanted to make a very quick comment. I'm a retired English as a second language teacher. I taught at Harrisburg High School for 9 years. We had about 125 ESL students at the high school. And many, many, many of them arrive here as teenagers, don't even know how to say hello in English. It takes 7 to 10 years to learn academic English, and many of those students will not know about voting in the time that they're in our education system. So I think we have to raise one.
Thank you for that.
Very short statement, not trying to make philosophical statements, but as a college professor, one of the things I'm concerned about is seeing under the educational accountability things we're doing in our schools, less and less emphasis on social studies, on history, on government. And we are seeing people coming into college who do not understand at all how our system works. Not too many of them are taking courses in the area. And I think anything that is done to increase participation, what you're dealing with are people who have difficult circumstances. The waitress who's called in to work extra hours because somebody called in absent, the sick baby, other things of that sort. These are circumstances that we can address, and this, I think, is the purpose beyond expanding the opportunities to vote while making sure that we do not have fraud in the elections. And I applaud your legislation.
Thank you for that.
you. Guess after that we can all get a little lighthearted now. Again, I'd like to thank Mr. Ray Whitaker for organizing this program. Got him a little gift. Hopefully it'll help him deal with the next class of interns. But thank you all.
I just wanted to conclude the ceremony by saying that the transformation that we have seen in these students has been remarkable over the last 13 weeks. As you have seen with their presentations, they put a great deal of work not only into this project, but into their entire internship. They really have produced work at a very high level of professionalism, and I feel that they now are our best outreach going back to their schools and as citizens of our Commonwealth. Each class continues to bring new and innovative ideas to this program, and I think that's why it continues to succeed as it does. I would be remiss if I did not congratulate and thank each of them personally at this moment for all that they have accomplished thus far in this semester and for making it really an enjoyable one for me and for Tony. They're an exceptional group of students. I got to get to know them pretty well over the course of the 13 weeks. They're extremely intelligent, motivated, and I think now more so than ever politically educated. I hope with the skill set that they have learned here that they can go on to succeed in whatever path they choose to take from here on out. So I have a certificate of completion I'd like to present them, and I'd like to call forward our Chief Clerk, Tony Barbush, because he is an instrumental part of this program, and I'd like him to present the certificates along with me. So I'd like to introduce Tony Barbush.
First of all, I'm not going to present it. I get more credit for this than I do. This program is something I wholeheartedly support, and I've worked with the fellows a little bit throughout it. I'm passionate about it, but the people that make it work are people who are what I'll refer to as repeat offenders. Folks like Mr. Walsh over there and his colleagues in the legislative reference room, Mr. Zeck and Mr. Liberato, and the staff who, many of these folks take the folks time after time, again, repeat offenders. These are the folks that make it work. These are the folks that make this program continue, allow it to continue, and have produced some very good graduates from it. And some of them are placed within. People sitting around the table. Some of them are, many of them have been placed in state government, local governments, government-related activities and occupations, and we're proud of all of them. We're very proud of the program. But most of the credit for all this goes to this program. He works diligently, he works enthusiastically, passionately with each class that comes through here, from start to finish, recruiting them, guiding them, directing them, and changing them. From the time they come in here until the time they leave, there's a vast and distinct difference, and we all recognize that. I think we all. But again, that's where the thanks goes. That's where the thanks belong. This gentleman should probably be in front of the classroom, but he does a very good job for us and for me here, and I can't thank him enough. So that's where the credit goes. We will make it good.
I'm going to read the certificate aloud so everyone can see it. The Pennsylvania House of Representatives Certificate of Recognition. This certificate is presented to the student in recognition of outstanding accomplishments and contributions in the Pennsylvania House of Representatives Legislative Fellowship Program with the dates September 10th to December 7th, 2012, and they're all signed by our House leadership and our Chief Clerk, Tony Barbush. And the first one goes to our first presenter, Mr. Nick Horn. Mr. Antoine Tate. Mr. Kevin Parker. Mr. Daniel Ryder. Mr. Karan Banks. Well, that will formally conclude our program. We will now open the doors and we can have lunch. If you have some time here, I really encourage you to walk around this building. It's a beautiful building, beautiful state capitol building. We're really proud of it, so if you have time, please walk around. It's Christmas season. We have Christmas trees up. It really just adds to the glamour of this place. We will have a photographer here for pictures for the students and their guests. So during lunch, if you take that opportunity, we will have that afforded to you. But thank you all for coming, and like I said, we can eat.
Thank you.